Under the flickering neon lights of the Chicago slum, a bullet pierced the skull of an old man. Blood splattering against the mottled brick wall like an abstract painting drenched in red. Jack Harlan witnessed it all from the shadows, his heart pounding like a war drum. But his hand remained tightly gripping the Beretta 92 FS hidden beneath his worn leather jacket. The old man, Henry Mills, a veteran who drove a tank in Vietnam, was just an innocent victim. His $450,000 in retirement savings stolen through a sophisticated hack. And now, the perpetrator had come to collect the debt with bullets. Jack, a former CIA agent with prematurely grey hair and grey-blue eyes like the winter sky, was not a hero. He was merely a ghost hunting for justice for the forgotten. Chicago is freezing tonight, the wind from Lake Michigan slashing against his face like a knife, carrying the smell of exhaust and garbage from the narrow streets. Jack had been tracking Marcus Kane, the notorious crime lord of the city, who ran a money-laundering empire through underground casinos and arms smuggling for 3 days. Information from an anonymous source within the CIA led him here, to an abandoned warehouse by the Chicago River, where Marcus was dealing with unreliable witnesses. Jack wasn't here on orders. He had retired 2 years ago after a betrayal in Kabul that left his wife dead. But after reading Mills's file, an old man living alone with photos of his deceased son, Jack couldn't sit still. Justice doesn't wait, he whispered to himself, the knife glinting under the broken streetlight. Inside the warehouse, the air was thick like fog, the sound of dripping water from the rusty roof mingling with the groans of Mr. Mills. Marcus Kane, a tall man in a silver-grey suit with a wolfish smirk, stood among 3 burly henchmen. He held a gleaming desert eagle, cigar smoke wafting from his mouth. Old man, you think you can hide that money? It belongs to me now. $450,000, enough to buy a whole neighborhood. Mr. Mills, bloodied and battered, struggled to lift his head, his voice weak. It is my money. For my grandchildren. Marcus laughed loudly, his laughter echoing like thunder, then pulled the trigger. The second bullet finished off the old man, his body collapsing onto the cold concrete floor. Jack felt his stomach churn. Not because of the death, he had seen too much, but because of its futility. Mr. Mills was not a criminal. He was merely a victim of the system that Marcus exploited, hacking retirement accounts, laundering money through shell companies in Mexico, then using it to fund weapons for street gangs. Jack took a deep breath, his muscles tense beneath his thin sweater. He had no detailed plan, only the instinct of a killer who had taken down 3 Taliban fighters in a cramped hideout. Now, he had to act before Marcus left. The warehouse door creaked as Jack gently pushed it open, stepping in like a whispering breeze. The light from the hanging bulb illuminated his face, highlighting the long scar on his left cheek, a memento from a grenade in Baghdad. The 3 henchmen turned sharply, hands reaching for the AK-47 seconds hanging at their sides. Marcus raised an eyebrow, his smile fading. Who are you, FBI? Or just a punk wanting to die? His voice was low and gruff, like the sound of an old truck engine. Jack did not respond. He sat down on an old wooden crate, pulled a filterless cigarette from his jacket pocket, a habit from his training days at Quantico, and lit it with a Zippo engraved with his wife's name, Lena. His slow movements caught them off guard. I'm here to take back what doesn't belong to you, Jack said, his tone flat as if reading the weather. Mr. Mills's retirement money. Return it, or no one leaves here. Marcus laughed, but a glint of caution flickered in his eyes. He signaled to the henchman on his left, a burly Mexican with a snake tattoo coiling around his neck, to step forward. The henchman charged in, swinging a fist as big as a hammer. Jack sidestepped, his movements smooth as flowing water, then struck the man's temple with his elbow, The sound of breaking bone echoed sharply. The man collapsed, eyes rolling back. The second henchman drew a knife, the blade glinting under the pale light. He slashed horizontally, aiming for Jack's neck. But Jack rolled away, sweeping his leg to trip the man. Jack sprang up, grabbing the collar of the man, slamming his head into the edge of the wooden crate. Blood splattered. The second man fell, frothing at the mouth. Now Marcus was finally taking action. He raised the Desert Eagle, his finger tightening on the trigger. "You're quick, but not quick enough." The first bullet tore through the air, embedding itself in the wooden crate beside Jack. Just an inch away. Jack rolled, drawing the Beretta from his waistband, firing back while moving. His first shot hit Marcus in the shoulder, causing him to scream in pain, the gun clattering to the floor. The last henchman, a tall black man with scars crisscrossing his face, lunged at Jack from behind, wrapping his arms around Jack's neck like a vice. Pain exploded in Jack's throat. But he did not panic. He stomped hard on the man's knee. Hearing the joint crack, the man loosened his grip for a second, enough for Jack to turn, driving his knee into the man's stomach. The third man doubled over, gasping for breath, and Jack finished him off with an uppercut to the jaw, sending him crashing to the blood-soaked ground. Now only Marcus remained. He clutched his shoulder, blood soaking through his suit, retreating toward the safe hidden behind a metal shelf. You will regret this. I have friends in Mexico, in Russia. They will hunt you down." Jack stepped forward. The Beretta aimed straight at his chest. "I'm used to being hunted." He kicked Marcus's Desert Eagle away, then rifled through his pockets, retrieving the safe key. Inside was a black leather suitcase filled with cash, $450,000, clean, without a wrinkle. Jack slung the suitcase over his shoulder, but Marcus suddenly lunged at him, holding a shard of broken glass from a fallen light bulb. The sharp glass sliced across Jack's arm, blood gushing, soaking his sleeve. Pain burned like fire, but Jack reacted quickly, using the butt of his gun to strike Marcus's temple. He fell face down, unconscious. Jack did not kill him. It was not the time. He knew Marcus was just a small cog in a larger network, a crime empire stretching from Chicago to the Mexican border, and even further, to the dark dens of Moscow. Jack burst out the back door of the warehouse, the cold wind biting into his wound, causing him to grit his teeth. Police sirens echoed in the distance. Someone had raised the alarm. He ran along the riverbank, the suitcase thumping against his back like the weight of his past. The deep gash bled, leaving a long trail on the wet pavement. Jack knew he needed a doctor, but not the ordinary kind. He turned into a dark alley, where an old truck waited, the getaway vehicle he had prepared in advance. The engine roared to life, and Jack slammed on the gas, racing into the Chicago night, leaving behind a warehouse full of bodies and secrets. But as he crossed the Lakeshore Drive bridge, a black SUV barreled out from a narrow alley, its headlights blinding as they swept across the windshield. Bullets began to slam into the truck, the sound of metal clashing like fireworks. Jack swerved the steering wheel, the truck nearly tipping over, tires screeching on the slick road. "Damn it," he muttered, his left hand clutching the wound, his right hand gripping the wheel. These were Marcus's men. They weren't going to let him escape easily. Jack fired back through the window, hitting a tire on the pursuing vehicle, causing it to spin and crash into the guardrail. But the last bullet from them struck his shoulder, piercing through flesh like fire. The truck barreled into the underground garage of an abandoned hotel, Jack tumbling out of the cabin, the suitcase of money rolling away. Blood from his shoulder and arm pooled on the cracked concrete floor. He staggered into the darkness, wondering if justice was worth this much. Chicago swallowed him whole. But Jack Harlan was not dead. Not yet. Which area are you listening to this story from? And what time is it where you are right now? Leave a comment below so I know you are still healthy and fully focused on this story. My dear friend, we will continue right after this. Blood from his shoulder soaked through the makeshift bandage. Dripping in time with the swaying bus on the dusty road leading from Chicago to the border, Jack Harlan sat huddled in the back seat, his pale face shadowed beneath the brim of an old fedora, trying to hide the pain like a wounded beast licking its wounds. It had been 3 days since the chaos at the Riverside warehouse, and he had crossed 3 states in smuggler trucks, avoiding all checkpoints. The suitcase with $450,000 lay at his feet, heavy like a curse, reminding him that Marcus Kane was not dead, and he would hunt Jack down to the end. Jack wondered if the Mexican border was an escape route or just another trap. The evening sun tinted the Nuevo Laredo desert red as Jack stepped out of the vehicle, the hot air thick with the smell of dry earth and cheap cigarette smoke. This border city was a hell on earth, the cobblestone streets cluttered with flickering neon bars, mariachi music echoing from crackling speakers, and scrutinizing glances from wandering thugs. Jack trudged into a roadside diner, his shoulder aching with every movement. But he dared not stop. Information from the encrypted phone, a gift from his CIA days, clearly indicated Marcus Kane had connections with the Los Zetas cartel here, using the retirement money to buy illegal weapons from Russia, then laundering it through drug shipments. A multi-headed snake, Jack muttered, ordering a shot of tequila to mask his presence. Across the street, a young girl, Elena Vargas, about 20 years old, with long black hair tied in a ponytail and sharp brown eyes, was arguing with 2 burly men by an old truck. She wore a white blouse covered in dust, likely a local medical worker, holding a bag of medicine. "You can't take my supplies, this is medicine for the village," Elena shouted in Spanish, her voice trembling but resolute. The 2 men, Zeta's henchmen, with skull tattoos on their arms, sneered, one grabbing her wrist, dragging her toward the truck. "Shut up, girl. Boss Kane needs room for special cargo." Jack recognized immediately they were forcing Elena to give up her truck to transport weapons. And Mr. Mills's money was the lubricant for this shipment. Anger surged in Jack's chest like a spreading fire. He was not the type of hero to rush in and save the damsel. But the image of Elena, strong, unyielding, in the deadly desert, reminded him of Lena, his wife, who once laughed in the sunny afternoons of Virginia before the bomb in Kabul took everything away. Jack tightened his grip on the tequila glass, then stood up, his movements slow but calculated. He crossed the street, his shoulder aching, sweat pouring down. But his steps remained steady like a lone wolf. "Let her go," Jack said in broken English mixed with Spanish, his deep voice drowning out the music from the nearby bar. The 2 men turned sharply, hands reaching for the guns tucked behind their backs. The larger one, with a thick mustache and bloodshot eyes from drinking, laughed loudly. "Stupid gringo. Get lost before I blow your head off." Elena looked at Jack, her eyes a mix of fear and hope. But she did not plead. She struggled, biting hard into the man's hand. The second man screamed, slapping her hard, sending Elena sprawling to the dusty ground. That was their last mistake. Jack charged in like a desert wind, his right hand grabbing the collar of the mustached man, yanking him forward. The man staggered, trying to draw his gun. But Jack elbowed him in the nose. The sound of breaking bone echoed sharply, blood spraying like a fountain. The second man turned, raising his Glock 19. But Jack rolled away. Sweeping his leg to knock the man over, he sprang up, stomping hard on the wrist holding the gun, hearing the metal clatter against the ground. "You," "You're dead." The man groaned, but Jack gave him no chance. He stomped the man's temple, his movements precise as in Krav Maga training, knocking him out instantly. Elena stood up, wiping blood from the corner of her mouth, her eyes wide with astonishment at Jack. Who are you? Why are you helping me?" she asked in fluent English, her voice still trembling. Jack bent down to pick up the Glock, checking the bullets, then handed it to her. "Just a passerby." "Who are they?" Elena hesitated. Then whispered Marcus Kane's henchman. "He collaborates with the Zetas, using trucks like mine to transport weapons from Russia across the border. The money. They use it to buy guns, then sell drugs for clean cash." Jack frowned, a larger conspiracy than he had imagined. Mr. Mills' retirement money was not only stolen, but also funding a weapons smuggling ring, turning innocent old men into unwitting accomplices in the street war. They jumped into Elena's truck, the engine roaring to life as she pressed the gas, racing into the night desert. The Mexican sky was pitch black, only speckled with stars and a dim moon. The desert wind howling through the window like the whispers of death. Jack bandaged his wound with a cloth from Elena's bag, his teeth gritting from the pain. "Kane won't stop," he said, his voice hoarse. "He'll send more people." Elena nodded, her hands gripping the steering wheel tightly. "I know a safe place, a cave near my village. But you... What do you have to do with Kane?" Jack looked out the window. Memories of Mr. Mills flashing blood on the wall. The smile that had faded. "He took what wasn't his, and I will take it back." They stopped by a small fire in the limestone cave, the flames dancing on the walls etched with ancient drawings. Elena shared her story. Her father was killed by the Zetas for refusing to transport drugs, and now she secretly provided medicine to the villagers to fight against the cartel. Jack shared little, only revealing that he was once an agent, now a ghost hunting for justice. Amid the stories, a noise echoed from the darkness, the roar of a jeep engine. "They're coming," Elena whispered, her hands trembling as she held the Glock. 4 Zetas jumped out of the vehicle, AR-15 rifles aimed straight at the cave. The firelight illuminated their faces, twisted with scars and tattoos. "Come out, girl, and that damn gringo," the leader shouted. Jack pushed Elena behind him, drawing the dagger from his boot, the blade glinting in the firelight. "Stay back," he said, then lunged out like a ghost. The battle erupted fiercely under the desert moon. The first man fired, the bullet embedding itself in the rock beside Jack, dust flying everywhere. He rolled, throwing the dagger into the man's wrist, causing the gun to drop. Jack charged in, landing a punch to the jaw, then choking the man from behind. The sound of breaking bone echoed. The man collapsed. The second man swung the butt of his gun, but Jack dodged, kicking the man's knee, then pummeling his face like a hammer. Blood splattered. The second man fell. The last 2 charged in simultaneously, one firing from a distance, the bullet grazing Jack's ear. He leaped to the side, grabbing the nearest man, using him as a shield. Bullets from the other man struck the back of his comrade, and Jack finished with an elbow thrust to the throat. The last man panicked, firing wildly, but Jack was close. Using the very AR-15, he had to smash into the man's head. The man fell face down, unconscious in the dust. Jack gasped for breath, blood seeping from his shoulder, mingling with sweat. Elena rushed out, her eyes filled with astonishment and concern. Are you a monster or an angel?" she asked. Jack chuckled dryly, wiping blood from the knife. "Just a survivor." But as they turned back to the truck, another engine noise echoed from afar. A larger ambush party, The desert tonight would show no mercy. Jack knew the hunt had truly begun. The roar of the Jeep engines shattered the night in the Mexican desert. Dust swirling like a golden storm under the crescent moon. Jack Harlan pressed Elena down onto the truck floor, his hand gripping the still warm Glock from the recent battle, his heart pounding like a war drum amidst the howling wind. "There are more of them," he whispered, his eyes scanning the rearview mirror. 3 Jeeps carrying 8 Zetas, rifles at the ready, headlights sweeping like the scythe of death. Elena, her face pale but hands gripping the wheel tightly, floored the gas. The tires screeching on the gravel. Jack's shoulder wound bled again, pain stabbing like needles. But he didn't complain, just fired back, his last bullet hitting the lead vehicle's tire, causing it to flip over with a horrific clash of metal. The truck barreled into a narrow canyon, darkness swallowing them like the mouth of a monster. Elena turned off the lights, relying on local instincts to navigate through paths only known to shepherds. Gunfire echoed from behind, bullets slamming into the truck like hail. But they escaped, for now, as dawn broke, painting the desert red like a sea of fire. Jack and Elena stopped by a rock pile, panting. "You have to go," Elena said, her voice hoarse, handing him a disposable phone and a hand-drawn map. "Kane has friends in Russia. We heard he buys weapons from there. Don't come back here. The desert will kill you before they do." Jack nodded, his grey-blue eyes flashing with rare gratitude. "Thank you." "Elena, stay safe." He vanished into the sunlight, the heavy suitcase on his shoulder, heading toward a small airport near the border. 3 days later, Jack sat in the economy-class cabin of a flight from Tijuana to Moscow, his shoulder tightly bandaged beneath a leather jacket, his face hidden behind sunglasses and a baseball cap. The plane's air was stuffy, the smell of cheap coffee mingling with the sound of a crying child. But his mind was focused on a single call with Sarah Reed, his old friend from the CIA, the one who had saved his life in Kabul. He had contacted her through an encrypted channel from the Mexican desert. His voice a low growl. "Sarah, Marcus Kane isn't just laundering money in Chicago. He's buying weapons from Russia, AK-47s, RPGs, the kind used to turn streets into war zones. Mr. Mills's retirement fund is the key." Sarah's voice, tense over the secure line, had replied Jack. "You're insane. Kane is connected to the Bratva, the Russian mafia. We have a file, but things are a mess internally. I'm sending you the coordinates of a warehouse on the outskirts of Moscow. Be careful, there's a mole." That warning echoed in Jack's head as the plane landed, snowflakes flurrying outside the window, turning the Russian capital into a cold, grey and white canvas. Moscow greeted him with a biting cold, the wind from the Moskva River lashing his face like a leather whip, carrying the scent of coal smoke and black bread from the street markets. Jack rented a rickety old Lada from a scar-faced driver, navigating through glistening cobblestone streets where Stalinist buildings stood like giant sentinels. He wasn't a tourist, he was a ghost. With a dagger hidden in his boot and a Beretta under his jacket, the warehouse was on the outskirts, a bleak concrete block next to an abandoned subway track, where the Bratva hid illegal weapons from Siberia. Jack parked half a kilometer away, moving on foot through the thick falling snow, his breath turning to white mist in the -20-degree air. Inside the warehouse, the air was as musty as an ancient tomb, the sound of water dripping from the ceiling mingling with whispers in Russian. Jack hid behind a wooden crate, his eyes scanning the scene. 3 burly Bratva members, with Russian bear tattoos on their arms, were inventorying firearms, hundreds of AKs, their ammunition boxes gleaming under the flickering fluorescent lights. One man held a phone, his voice low. "Da. Kane has transferred the money. The shipment goes to Mexico next week." Jack tightened his grip on his knife, Here was the proof. But before he could take a photo, a shadow slipped past from behind a professional assassin, dressed in black leather, his face covered except for a pair of ice-blue eyes. It was Viktor Kozlov, the Bratva's trusted enforcer, trained in the Spetsnaz, and he had been waiting. Viktor lunged without a sound, his balisong knife flashing like a snowy bolt of lightning. Jack dodged just in time, the blade grazing his cheek, carving a hot trail of blood in the freezing cold. "Amerikansky," Viktor whispered in broken English, a smirk revealing a set of yellowed teeth. "Kane sends his regards." They crashed into each other in the confined space, the clash of metal echoing like a church bell. Viktor slashed horizontally, aiming for Jack's neck, but he blocked with his forearm, a sharp pain shooting up to his old shoulder wound. Jack countered with a low kick to the knee, hearing a sickening crack, but Viktor only laughed, spinning to slam an elbow into his chest. Jack fell backward into a crate, the wood splintering, guns scattering everywhere. The three Bratva members turned, drawing their guns, but Jack had already rolled away from the first volley of bullets. Wood fragments, flying like shrapnel. He sprang up, grabbed a nearby AK, and fired back while running. A shot hit one man in the shoulder, sending him sprawling, his blood a dark red stain on the white snow. Viktor charged again, his knife stabbing straight for Jack's stomach. But he sidestepped, using the rifle's stock to smash it against his temple. The sound of metal meeting bone was dry and sharp, and Viktor staggered. But he was as fast as a demon, delivering a side kick to Jack's knee that made him drop to one leg. "You die here," Viktor growled, raising his knife high. Jack didn't wait. He rolled to the side, grabbed Viktor's leg to pull him down, then pinned him, driving his own dagger through his hand. The blade pierced flesh and bone, pinning it firmly to the concrete floor. Viktor screamed in agony, warm blood spurting into the cold. The two remaining Bratva members rushed forward, one swinging his gunstock. But Jack spun, using a leg sweep to knock the man flat. The other fired, the bullet searing past his ear, but Jack was already on him, locking him in a chokehold from behind. There was a snap of bone, and the second man collapsed. The last one panicked, running for the door, but Jack fired a single shot into his leg, causing him to tumble into a pool of his own blood. The warehouse was now deathly silent, filled only with Jack's ragged breathing and Viktor's moans. He searched the man's pockets and found a USB drive containing classified documents, arms purchase agreements between Kane and the Bratva, with Mr. Mills's retirement money used to finance the first shipment. "Sarah will love this," Jack muttered, tucking the USB into his pocket. But as he turned to leave, his phone vibrated. A message from Sarah Jack. "Get out now. The mole knows you're in Moscow. They're coming." His heart sank. A betrayal from within the CIA. But who and why? Jack burst through the back door as the snow fell thicker, covering his tracks. Sirens wailed in the distance. Russian police. Or worse, Bratva reinforcements. He leaped onto the abandoned subway tracks and plunged into the damp darkness of the underground tunnel. Headlights from a jeep swept past, bullets whizzing behind him. Jack ran without stopping, his breath like smoke, wondering if Sarah was the traitor, or just another victim like Mr. Mills. Moscow swallowed him whole, but Jack Harlan never ran forever. The hunt now moved to Tokyo, where the next arms cache awaited. The darkness of the Moscow subway tunnel swallowed Jack Harlan's hurried footsteps, his breath forming white clouds in the bone-chilling cold. The distant sirens, like the baying of hounds chasing their prey. The evidence-filled USB was in his pocket, as heavy as a curse from the Bratva. But Jack didn't stop. He burst onto the surface, the heavy snow covering his tracks. and vanished into the Russian night just before special forces swarmed the area. 3 days later, on a flight from Sheremetyevo to Narita, he sat motionless by the window, his shoulder aching from the old wound. His eyes fixed on the grey-white clouds. Sarah Reed had sent new coordinates Marcus Kane's arms cache on the outskirts of Tokyo, where the Bratva was moving a shipment of AK-47s through the Yakuza's underground network. Destroy it, Jack. But be careful, Kane knows you're coming. Her message glowed on his encrypted phone. Jack clenched his fist, wondering if Sarah was truly an ally, or just another pawn on a chessboard of betrayal. Tokyo greeted him with a persistent drizzle, tiny droplets clinging to the windshield of the Toyota taxi, turning the city into a glistening, wet canvas of neon. Lights from the giant billboards in Shibuya illuminated the crowded streets, the sound of car horns blending with the calls of takoyaki vendors from roadside stalls, the smell of grilled mackerel smoke wafting through the damp air. Jack rented a small ryokan in Asakusa, with thin paper walls and soft tatami floors. But he didn't sleep. He checked his Beretta, wiped his dagger clean, and studied the map of the warehouse, an abandoned factory on the outskirts of Yokohama, where the Yakuza hid weapons under the guise of electronics. On his first night, he wandered through the Tsukiji night market, blending into the crowd of masked faces, his eyes scanning the anonymous figures. Searching for any sign of Kane, he was no longer alone. A tall figure, dressed in a black yukata, followed him from the sushi counter to a dark alley. The man was Kenji Sato, a 30-year-old judo master with muscles rippling under his robe, a stern, square-jawed face, and eyes as dark as a samurai's blade. Kenji was no random stranger. He was a former Yakuza member, now living in seclusion after his father was killed by Marcus Kane in a weapons dispute. Gringo, Kenji called softly in broken English, blocking Jack's path beside a stall of glowing red lanterns. You are no tourist. I saw you tracking the shipment from Russia. Kane killed my father. He refused to sell guns to the Americans. Jack stopped, his hand instinctively touching his knife. But Kenji's gaze held no hostility, only the same burning fire of vengeance that he felt. I don't need an ally, Jack replied, his low voice cutting through the pitter-patter of rain on the tin roof. Kenji gave a faint smile, revealing a set of perfectly white teeth. You do. The Yakuza guard that warehouse like watchdogs. Alone. You will surely die. They formed a reluctant partnership, moving through the rainy night down the narrow streets of Yokohama, where neon lights reflected in puddles like vibrant streaks of color. The warehouse appeared like a grey concrete ghost on the riverbank, with a rusted roll-up door and a jagged barbed wire fence. The hum of machinery from within mixed with the sound of the rain, and Jack caught the faint smell of gun oil through a crack in the door. Kenji led the way, using a key stolen from a Yakuza henchman to open a side gate. Inside, the air was as heavy as a tomb, the light from a dangling bulb illuminating wooden crates stamped with Cyrillic letters. The arms shipment from Moscow, enough to turn Chicago into a war zone. 5 Yakuza members, their bodies covered in dragon and phoenix tattoos, were taking inventory. 2 guarded the door, while 3 opened crates, the AKs gleaming under a layer of grease. Jack gave the signal, and they moved in like shadows. Kenji went first. His judo movements as fluid as flowing water, he grabbed the first guard's collar, executing an ippon seoi naage to throw the man over his shoulder, his head hitting the concrete floor with a cracking sound. The second man drew a short katana, a wakizashi, and slashed horizontally, the steel blade flashing under the dim yellow light. But Kenji dodged in time, blocking with his forearm, then countering with a low kick to the knee. A sickening crunch of bone echoing in the silence. The man collapsed, and Kenji finished him with a Hadaka Jime chokehold. squeezing until the man stopped breathing. His eyes wide and white. Jack followed, his Beretta raised. Firing a silenced shot into the third man's shoulder, the bullet tore through flesh, blood spraying in a dark red arc onto a wooden crate. The man screamed, lunging with a dagger, but Jack sidestepped, smashed the gun's stock against his temple, then spun and kicked him in the stomach, causing him to vomit blood and fall backward. The remaining two panicked, one firing his AK wildly, bullets chewing into the concrete wall and sending up clouds of dust. Jack rolled to avoid the spray, grabbed the man's leg to trip him, then drove his dagger through his gun hand. The cold blade pierced flesh, and a scream echoed like a demon's cry. The last man, the leader with a skull tattoo on his neck, drew a classic Japanese Type 14 pistol and fired straight at Jack's chest. The bullet grazed his side, tearing through his jacket and skin, the pain burning like fire. Kenji rushed in to save him, using his body as a shield, landing a hook punch on the leader's jaw that knocked it clean out of alignment. They wrestled on the floor. Slippery with rain leaking through holes in the roof, Kenji locked his hands, and the leader drove an elbow into his ribs. The crack of bone audible. Jack, blood streaming from his side, got back up and threw a homemade smoke grenade into the pile of weapons crates. Thick white smoke billowed out, blanketing the warehouse in a hellish fog, filled with the sounds of coughing and curses in Japanese. Through the smoke, Jack groped his way forward, grabbing the leader from behind in a vice-like chokehold. "Kane sends his regards," Jack whispered, his voice hoarse with pain. The man struggled, but Kenji was already there, applying a nude Garami armlock, the dry snap of the joint dislocating, echoing through the chaos. The leader collapsed, unconscious in a spreading pool of blood. They planted timed explosives under the crates, enough to destroy the entire shipment without bringing down the factory. The first explosion went off as they burst through the back door, flames erupting to consume the warehouse. Black smoke billowing into the drizzly night sky. But the Yakuza didn't give up easily. The roar of high-powered motorcycle engines grew louder in the distance, their headlights cutting through the darkness like scythes. Kenji pushed Jack toward a hidden electric scooter. "Go, I'll hold them off." Jack shook his head, but the pain in his side was blurring his vision, his shirt soaked with blood. "Together," he growled. But Kenji just smiled, drawing a short sword from his belt. "My revenge ends here. Yours doesn't." Jack gunned the engine of a nearby stolen motorcycle, speeding into the Yokohama night, the rain whipping his face like a leather lash. Behind him, the sounds of gunfire and clashing metal erupted, Kenji fighting off the pursuers, his figure fading in the rearview mirror. Jack turned onto the highway leading to the Shinkansen station, his blood dripping onto the slick asphalt. The high-speed train ticket was ready in his pocket, but the deep wound made him stagger as he boarded, passengers looking at him with a mixture of curiosity and fear. The train shot off at 300 kilometers per hour, Tokyo receding behind him like a broken neon dream. Jack huddled in a back seat, pressing hard on his wound, a memory of Lena flashing in his mind. "Don't let hate consume you, Jack." But hate was his only fuel now, and it was leading him to Paris, where Sarah Reed was waiting, with secrets darker than the Tokyo night. The Shinkansen bullet train sped past the lush green rice fields of Japan, leaving the fire and smoke of the Yokohama warehouse behind like a burning scar on Jack Harlan's memory. Blood from the wound in his side seeped through the makeshift bandage, making him grit his teeth as he huddled in a back seat, his grey-blue eyes staring out the rain-streaked window. Kenji Sato was probably dead. He had chosen to stay behind to hold off the Yakuza pursuers. His powerful form, now just a ghost, in the rearview mirror. "My revenge ends here," Kenji had said. And Jack knew it was a farewell. But his own hatred was far from over. It was leading him to France, where Sarah Reed awaited. Her encrypted messages growing more and more ambiguous. Meet me in Paris. I have proof Kane is manipulating Europe. Trust no one. Jack clutched the USB from Moscow, wondering if Sarah was the traitor, or just another disposable pawn in Marcus Kane's game. Paris greeted him with a persistent drizzle, tiny droplets rolling down the windshield of a hastily rented Renault, turning the city of light into a bleak, melancholic painting. The Eiffel Tower twinkled with yellow lights under a heavy sky. The sound of car horns from the Champs-Élysées blending with the smell of baking crepes and Gauloise's cigarette smoke from a roadside cafe. Jack wasn't a tourist, he was a ghost, with a Beretta hidden under his drenched leather jacket and a cold dagger in his boot. He rented a small apartment in Montmartre, with faded yellow wallpaper and creaking wooden floors. But he didn't sleep, he watched Sarah from a distance, through binoculars from a balcony overlooking the Seine River glittering under the streetlights. Sarah Reed, 32 years old, with short brown hair and sharp blue eyes. The woman who had saved him from a trap in Kabul was now meeting with shadowy figures in an underground bar at the foot of the Eiffel Tower. What game is she playing? Jack whispered, suspicion eating at him like acid. On the third night, the rain fell harder, the wind from the Seine whipping his face like a leather lash. Carrying the musty smell of ancient cobblestone alleys, Sarah emerged from the bar. Le Caveau, her black trench coat clinging to her slender frame, a small leather briefcase in her hand, likely containing the evidence. She walked along the riverbank. Her steps hurried under the wrought-iron lanterns, the shadow of the Eiffel Tower looming behind her like a giant finger pointing into the darkness. Jack followed, keeping a distance of 200 meters, blending in with the crowd of people drunk on wine and the sound of an accordion echoing from a bar. But he wasn't alone. Two men in black suits, their movements as stiff as mercenaries, were tailing Sarah from ahead. They were Kane's men. Jack recognized them from the faint eagle tattoo on one man's wrist, the mark of a network that stretched from Chicago to Paris. Sarah turned into a small garden next to the Eiffel Tower, where wild rose bushes were slick with rain and stone benches reflected the dim yellow lights. She sat down, opened the briefcase, and took out a file of documents. Jack could see them clearly through his binoculars. Forged contracts, using Mr. Mills's retirement money to fund a European political lobbying campaign, bribing French parliamentarians to expand the arms network. Kane wasn't just smuggling, he was manipulating policy, turning Europe into a launch pad for his criminal empire. But before Sarah could hide the documents, the two mercenaries lunged from the shadows, one grabbing her hair and yanking her head back, the other pointing a Sig Sauer directly at her temple. Hand it over, little girl. Kane doesn't like being double-crossed. Sarah struggled, driving an elbow into the first man's stomach. But he just sneered, slapping her so hard that blood trickled from the corner of her mouth. Jack felt a rush of hot anger. Despite his suspicions, he couldn't let her die. He burst out from the bushes, his movements lightning fast in the pouring rain, his Beretta raised, firing a silenced shot into the gunman's knee. The tiny pop was drowned out by the rain as the man collapsed, screaming in pain, his Sig Sauer clattering on the wet stone. The second man spun around, drawing a crescent-bladed dagger that flashed under the lights, slashing horizontally at Jack's neck. He dodged just in time, the blade slicing through his jacket, blood mixing with rainwater as it streamed down his shoulder. They crashed into each other under the branches of an ancient oak tree, rain lashing their faces like needles, the rustling of leaves muffling their ragged breaths. The mercenary swung his knife repeatedly, slashing vertically and horizontally like the Grim Reaper's scythe, but Jack blocked with his forearm, a sharp pain shooting up to the old wound in his side. He countered with a low kick to the man's knee, hearing a sickening crack, then grabbed his collar and pulled him to the ground. The man struggled, his knife piercing Jack's jacket and tearing hot flesh. But he was already on top. Smashing an elbow into his temple, a dry crack of bone echoed, and the second man collapsed, unconscious in a spreading red puddle. Sarah stood up, her hand holding the document trembling, her eyes a mixture of astonishment and suspicion. "Jack, were you following me?" she asked, her voice hoarse in the rain. Her wet hair stuck to her face. Jack lowered his beretta but didn't holster it. He stepped forward, his voice deep and gravelly. "Who did you meet at the pub? You're the mole. Aren't you Kane used you to sell me out in Moscow?" Sarah backed away, her hand touching the small pistol hidden under her coat. But she didn't draw it. "It wasn't me, it's our superior, Thomas Hale, the deputy director of the CIA. He was bought by Kane with retirement money. They're using it to lobby a French senator to expand arms trafficking into the EU. I was trying to get evidence to save you." Rain rolled down her cheeks, mixing with tears. Or was it just the rain? Jack clenched his fist as a memory of Lena flashed through his mind, the betrayal in Kabul, where a comrade sold them out for money. "Prove it," he growled, pointing the gun at Sarah's chest. She hesitated, then handed over the file. Thomas Hale's signature was crystal clear on a contract with the French senator to protect the border with illegal weapons. But as Jack bent down to pick it up, Sarah suddenly raised her gun and pulled the trigger. The bullet grazed his ear, searing hot, burning the damp air. Jack rolled away. Firing back, the shot hit her shoulder, knocking Sarah backward onto a stone bench. Blood staining, her trench coat red. They lay there, panting in the rain. Guns pointed at each other like two wounded animals. "Why?" Jack asked, his voice breaking for the first time in years. Sarah clutched her shoulder, tears mixing with the rain. "To save my daughter. Kane kidnapped her in Virginia. I had to pretend." Jack lowered his gun, the anger dissolving into a familiar pain. Justice always demanded a price. He pulled her up, temporarily bandaging the wound with a cloth from his pocket, then whispered, "I'll save her, but if you sell me out again—" Sarah nodded, her eyes filled with gratitude and fear. "Thank you, Jack." They vanished into the Paris night, the documents hidden in a soaked leather briefcase. But Jack's trust was now as shaky as the Eiffel Tower in a storm. Kane wasn't just manipulating Europe. He was pulling the whole world into his vortex. Jack knew the next part of his journey would lead him to Nepal, to a place of recovery and secrets from the past. But now, the ghost of betrayal followed him more closely than ever. The Paris rain still pattered on the awnings of Montmartre as Jack Harlan pulled Sarah Reed into a drenched Renault, its engine roaring to life as it sped into the dark night. The wound on her shoulder bled through the makeshift bandage. But Sarah's eyes remained sharp, a mix of determination and fear. "Kane has my daughter in Virginia," she whispered, her hand tightly gripping the wet file in the leather case. "He's using her to force me, to lobby for illegal arms into the EU, turning retirement funds into a tool to manipulate senators." Jack stepped on the gas, the car speeding over the Pont Neuf, the Eiffel Tower twinkling behind them like a reminder of deceit. "I will save her," he growled. But his trust was as cracked as the rain-streaked windshield. "But if you hide anything from me again—" Sarah nodded, her voice breaking. "I swear. Jack, for now, you need to recover. Go to Nepal. I have a contact in Kathmandu. Kane hasn't reached there yet." Jack didn't reply, just drove into the darkness, knowing this journey would lead him to the cold peaks of the Himalayas, where the past was waiting to devour him. 3 days later, the plane landed at Tribhuvan Airport in Kathmandu, the thin air and the scent of incense from Buddhist temples spreading like a false promise of peace. Nepal welcomed Jack with brilliant golden sunlight on narrow stone-paved streets. The sound of temple bells mingling with the calls of vendors selling steamed momo from roadside carts, and the majestic Himalayas looming in the distance like giant gods guarding secrets. He rented a small hut on the outskirts of Pokhara, by the shimmering Fewa Lake, with cracked mud walls and a simple thatched roof. A place where he could lick his wounds without being hunted. Sarah had arranged it a local doctor named Rajesh, with hands calloused from trekking expeditions, bandaged the stab wound on Jack's side with medicinal leaves and wild honey. "Rest now, my friend," Rajesh said in broken English, his kind brown eyes looking at him. "The Himalayas show no mercy to the weak." Jack nodded. But sleep didn't come easily. It brought with it the ghosts of his past. The first night, under a sky glittering with stars like diamonds over the Annapurna Peak, Jack lay on a creaking bamboo bed, sweating despite the Himalayan cold seeping through the cracks in the wall. Memories flooded back like an avalanche. Kabul in 2018. The yellow desert sand of Afghanistan clinging to the face of Lena, his wife, as she laughed over a cup of green tea at their temporary base. Jack was a top CIA agent then, hunting terrorist networks. But Thomas Hale, the deputy director now suspected of being the mole, had sold them out. "Your team's position has been compromised," Hale had said over the radio, his voice cold. But the truth was, he had taken a bribe from an arms dealer. The IED exploded under their Humvee, shrapnel tearing through the air. Lena's scream echoing in Jack's head. "Jack, run," he survived, crawling from the wreckage with a scar on his cheek and a shattered heart. But Lena did not. The CIA called it a combat incident. But Jack knew the truth, betrayal for money. Just like how Kane was using Mr. Mills's retirement fund to buy souls. Justice doesn't come from a gun, Lena once said, her hand resting on her barely showing pregnant belly. It comes from protecting the innocent. Jack clenched his fists, his nails digging into his palms. His motive wasn't revenge, but silent justice for people like Lena, like Mr. Mills, like Sarah's daughter. The next morning, as the sunrise painted Fewa Lake a sea of fire, Jack decided to trek into the Himalayas to chase away the ghosts. He hired a scrawny mule and a local guide named Tenzing, a 20-year-old Sherpa with a brilliant white smile and eyes as black as an abyss. They climbed winding stone paths, the mountain wind whistling through the ravines like the whispers of demons, carrying the scent of melting snow and wild rhododendrons. But the peace was shattered when they heard crying from a cave hidden behind a giant boulder, where a group of Nepali children, about 6 of them from 8 to 12 years old, were bound hand and foot, their faces smudged with dirt and fear. They were victims of a human trafficking ring, and Jack immediately recognized the sign, a faded eagle tattoo on the arm of a guard, one of Marcus Kane's men. He wasn't just dealing weapons, he was selling children across the Nepal-India border, using retirement money to bribe local officials, turning innocent children into commodities. Tenzing whispered, "Human traffickers. They take them through the Thorongla Pass." Jack signaled for silence, his hand touching the beretta hidden under his thick trekking jacket. 3 traffickers, with tanned skin and crisscrossing scars, were arguing by a small fire, Makarov pistols dangling at their hips. They never expected death from the west was coming. Jack burst from behind the rock, his movements as swift as the mountain wind. He grabbed the first man by the throat, squeezing from behind, while his other hand twisted the man's gun wrist. The sound of bone snapping echoed dryly as the man collapsed without a sound. The second man spun around, drawing a curved dagger that glinted in the Himalayan sun, slashing at Jack's stomach. He dodged just in time, the blade tearing through the thick fabric of his jacket, then countered with a low kick to the knee. Hearing the crack of the dislocating joint, The man fell, and Jack finished him with a hook to the jaw, blood splattering on the grey rock. The last man panicked, firing his Makarov wildly, the bullets kicking up dust as they slammed into the rock beside him. Jack rolled to avoid the shots, the mountain wind whipping his face like a leather strap, then lunged forward, slamming his elbow into the man's temple. The impact echoed through the valley as the third man collapsed into the dying fire. The children burst into tears as Tenzing rushed in to cut their ropes with his sharp Sherpa knife. "Thank you, Mister," a little boy whispered, his big, tear-filled eyes looking at Jack as if he were a god. He ruffled the child's hair, his voice hoarse. "You're safe now." But when he searched the leader's pockets, he found a phone, a message from Kane: "Dispose of the shipment of children before Harlan sticks his nose in." Jack gripped the phone, his rage erupting like an avalanche. Suddenly, the ground shook. A deep, rumbling sound came from above, as a white torrent of snow cascaded down the mountainside like a monstrous white beast. An avalanche. The last trafficker had triggered a warning mine before he died. Jack screamed. "Run!" He pushed the children into a shallow cave as Tenzing shielded them with his body, the icy wind stinging their faces like needles, the roar drowning out all other sounds. They hugged the ground, snow burying their trekking boots, their breath turning to white smoke in the -40-degree cold. A large wall of snow collapsed over the entrance, burying the fire and the traffickers' bodies. But Jack and the group survived, by luck, or by fate. When the avalanche stopped, they dug their way out into the weak afternoon sun, the children shivering and clinging to each other. Tenzing clapped Jack on the shoulder. "You are a hero of the Himalayas." But Jack just shook his head. The memory of Lena returning, protect the innocent. The phone vibrated, a message from Sarah. "Kane has me. My daughter is still in Virginia. Save us." "Jack, he's in Spain." His heart sank. The recovery was over. Jack entrusted the children to Tenzing, shouldered his backpack, and headed for Madrid, where the real storm was waiting. The phone vibrated in Jack Harlan's calloused hand, the screen glowing in the faint afternoon light of the Himalayas, carrying a desperate whisper from Sarah Reed. "Kane has me. My daughter is still in Virginia. Save us." "Jack, he's in Spain." His heart tightened as if squeezed by a trekking rope. And the memory of Lena, his wife lost to a similar betrayal, came rushing back like an avalanche, burying all thoughts of rest. Tenzing and the rescued children watched him from a distance, their eyes full of hope. But Jack only nodded a farewell, slung his backpack over his shoulder, and raced down the mountain with the speed of a wounded wolf. Nepal may have been a place to heal, but Madrid would be the battlefield, Marcus Kane's main stronghold, where he held Sarah and plotted to manipulate Europe with blood-soaked retirement funds. The flight from Kathmandu to Barajas was 12 hours of hell, the cabin air thick with the smell of cheap coffee and the sound of crying babies. But Jack didn't sleep. He checked his Beretta, wiped his snowmelt, stained dagger clean, and studied a map of Madrid on an encrypted phone. The capital of Spain appeared beneath the plane's wing like a vibrant painting, red-tiled roofs gleaming under the Mediterranean sun, the royal palace sparkling beside the Manzanares River, and the narrow, stone-paved streets of La Latina echoing with the sound of flamenco guitars from the taverns. But Jack knew that beauty was just a facade. Kane had turned Madrid into a money-laundering hub, using underground casinos to move weapons from Russia and Japan to Mexico, financed by Mr. Mills's $450,000. "He will pay?" Jack whispered, his fist clenched so tight his knuckles turned white. He rented a beat-up seat from the airport and drove through bustling boulevards where scooters swarmed like bees from a disturbed hive, the hot wind carrying the smell of fried olives and paella smoke from roadside eateries. Sarah was being held at the El Toro Negro Casino, a subterranean den beneath the old Puerta del Sol district, where Spain's elite gathered for high-stakes gambling and dark dealings. Jack wasn't going in alone through an emergency CIA contact, though he still suspected the mole. Thomas Hale. He met Lucia Reyes, a 35-year-old local police officer with her dark hair tied in a high ponytail and brown eyes as sharp as a flamenco dancer's blade. Lucia, who had lost her younger brother to Kane's arms ring, was waiting for him at a small cafe by Plaza Mayor, where fountains trickled in the afternoon sun. "You're Harlan, the CIA says you're crazy, but I need you," she said in Spanish-accented English, her deep voice cutting through the cooing of pigeons. "Kane is protected by Madrid's police chief. We go in alone, no backup." Jack nodded, their eyes meeting with a silent understanding they were both ghosts hunting for justice. Pushed into the vortex by their pasts, they planned their attack in the shadows of the cafe, the rich aroma of espresso filling the air. A map of the casino spread across a scarred wooden table. El Toro Negro was deep underground. Its entrance, a fake wine shop, guarded by 24 of Kane's men, armed with rifles and daggers. Lucia provided a schematic from an inside source, her voice tense. "Sarah is being held in the VIP room, next to the money vault. Kane is there tonight. He's meeting with the French senator." Jack gripped his knife. "I'll handle Kane. You get Sarah." Lucia's lips curled into a smirk, revealing white teeth. "Don't die before you finish him." Night fell on Madrid like a black velvet curtain, the pale yellow streetlights illuminating ancient stone walls. The sound of drunken laughter from bars mingling with the clang of streetcars. They approached through a dark alley behind the wine shop, the faint scent of fermenting grapes hanging in the damp air. Lucia used an encrypted key to open a back door, and they slipped inside like shadows. A cold stone corridor led to a rickety elevator, the urgent rhythm of flamenco music echoing from below. When the elevator doors opened, the casino revealed itself like a neon-lit hell. Roulette wheels spun under flashing red and blue lights. Cigar smoke billowed, and men in black suits stood with guns at their hips. Jack and Lucia split up, melting into the crowd. He in an old leather jacket, she in a form-fitting black dress like a high-stakes gambler. Lucia moved first, her steps gliding smoothly past a blackjack table, her hand lightly touching the Glock hidden beneath her dress. She approached the VIP room through a frosted glass corridor, where 2 guards stood watch, eagle tattoos on their wrists. One turned, recognizing her as a cop, but Lucia was faster. She grabbed his wrist, twisting her body in a Spanish Aikido move that snapped his arm with a dry crack. The second guard drew a knife, the steel blade flashing under the neon lights as he slashed at her neck. Lucia dodged, the blade tearing her dress at the shoulder, then countered with a high kick to his jaw. He flew backward into the glass wall, which shattered into 1,000 pieces like a meteor shower. Jack burst into the main room, where Marcus Kane sat in a red leather chair, a glass of cognac in his hand, surrounded by 6 burly henchmen, and Sarah, who was tied to a chair with her mouth taped shut, her eyes red. Harlan Kane roared, his smirk vanishing as he raised a desert eagle. The casino erupted into chaos. Guests screamed and scattered. Card tables overturned, and silver chips rolled across the marble floor. Jack rolled to dodge the first shot, the bullet shattering a gilded wall, then sprang up and fired back, his silenced Beretta hitting a henchman in the shoulder, sending him sprawling, blood spraying across the red carpet. The fight exploded with the furious pace of a flamenco dance. 2 men rushed Jack with daggers, their steel blades clashing under the flashing lights. He blocked one slash, a sharp pain shooting up his arm, then used his elbow to smash the first man's nose. Blood sprayed as the man fell forward. The second man stabbed low at his stomach, but Jack dodged, using the man's own dagger to stab him in the thigh. the sound of tearing flesh, horrifyingly loud. He screamed, and Jack finished him with a hook to the throat. The second man collapsing in a spreading pool of blood, Kane stood up, firing repeatedly, bullets tearing through the hot, cigar smoke-filled air. Jack used a roulette table as a shield, silver chips flying like rain, then dashed across an opening and shot Kane in the leg. He collapsed, his Desert Eagle clattering to the floor. You can't stop me," Kane growled, blood from his leg soaking into the carpet. Jack advanced, pressing his knife to Kane's throat. "Mr. Mills's money," and Sarah, just then. Lucia burst in from a side door and cut Sarah's ropes. Shouting, "Let's go," Sarah hugged Lucia. But a remaining henchman charged forward with a rifle, firing wildly. Lucia pushed Sarah down as a bullet slammed into her own shoulder. Warm blood spilling in the underground chill of the casino. Jack spun around, shot the last henchman, then rushed to Kane. Pulling a new USB from his pocket, it contained a plan for a major bombing in Chicago, using illegal weapons to destroy the FBI headquarters and erase all traces of his empire. He's going to blow up the city. Kane laughed maniacally, but Jack silenced him with a hard punch to the jaw. They dragged each other out of the burning casino, black smoke billowing from the overturned tables, and into the late-night Madrid streets. The sound of police sirens wailing in the distance. Sarah panted beside Lucia, who was clutching her shoulder. "Thank you. Both of you." But Jack looked at the USB, his expression dark, a bomb in Chicago. The journey wasn't over, it was leading him home, where the real nightmare awaited. Smoke from the El Toro Negro casino still billowed into the Madrid sky like a dark curse as Jack Harlan floored the accelerator of the seat, sending it speeding through the ancient stone streets. Police sirens wailing in the distance like hounds chasing their prey. Sarah Reed sat beside him, holding Lucia Reyes's shoulder tightly, blood from the gunshot wound staining her trench coat, her face pale under the yellow streetlights. "Thank you, both of you," Sarah whispered, her voice a broken mix of pain and relief, her hand gripping the USB containing the Chicago bombing plan. Lucia, the local cop with her dark hair in disarray, just nodded, her sharp brown eyes flashing with resilience. "Get her to safety. Kane will hunt you." Jack didn't answer. Just pressed the gas harder. The car racing into the Spanish night. The Mediterranean wind whipping against the windshield like a leather strap. The USB in his pocket felt heavy, a time bomb in Chicago, using illegal weapons from Russia and Japan, powerful enough to wipe out the FBI headquarters and hide Marcus Kane's empire. The journey wasn't over, it was leading him home, where the real nightmare awaited. 3 days later, the plane landed at O'Hare under the persistent drizzle of Chicago, the cold air from Lake Michigan seeping through Jack's worn leather jacket, carrying the smell of exhaust and garbage from the familiar streets. This windy city had once been home, where he grew up with streetball games and dreams of joining the CIA, but now it was just a battlefield. Sarah walked beside him, her shoulders stitched up in a makeshift clinic in Madrid, but her eyes were filled with darkness, the fear for her 8-year-old daughter Lily. Still threatened by Kane in Virginia, they rented a safe apartment in Wicker Park, with its stained brick walls and creaky wooden floors, where Jack checked his Beretta one last time, wiping clean the blood-stained dagger from the casino. "Kane will be at the charity gala tonight," Sarah said, her voice hoarse, spreading a map on the scarred wooden table. "At the Palmer House Hotel, where Chicago's elite gather. He uses it to meet Thomas Hale, the CIA mole. We assassinate him there. Take the bomb detonation code." Jack frowned, memories of Lena flashing. "Are you sure? Your betrayal nearly got me killed in Paris?" Sarah lowered her head, tears streaming down her cheeks. He took Lily to force me. I had to go undercover, send false information to mislead you. But now, I just want the girls safe. Trust me this time. Jack, they planned in the dark of the apartment. The strong smell of coffee wafting from the old gas stove. The map marking the entrance to the hotel. And Kane's location, the VIP room on the rooftop, where he would finalize the contract with Hale to detonate the bomb. Jack would approach through the underground service tunnel. Sarah would act as bait from the main entrance. Lucia, through encrypted communication, would block the escape route. I'm worried about Hale. Jack growled, gripping the knife tightly. He's the key. Sarah nodded. Her eyes a mix of hope and despair. After that, we save Lily. The girl. She looks so much like your Lena. Those words pierced Jack's heart like a blade. But he just nodded, the anger and pain merging into a steel resolve. That evening, Chicago shone brightly under the drizzle. Neon lights from Michigan Avenue illuminating the skyscrapers like silver blades. The sound of jazz echoing from lakeside bars. The Palmer House Hotel was magnificent with its glossy marble lobby, crystal chandeliers hanging from the soaring ceiling, and the elite crowd in tuxedos, laughing and chatting over bubbling champagne. Sarah walked in like a lady, her black dress hugging her slender figure, her short brown hair sparkling under the lights, instantly catching Kane's gaze. He stood in the VIP room, his silver-grey suit fitting his large frame, a smirk revealing his yellowed teeth. Shaking hands with Thomas Hale, the CIA deputy director with a fake rosy complexion. Sarah, my dear, Kane whispered as she approached, caressing her cheek possessively. You did well. The bomb will go off tomorrow morning. Sarah forced a smile, her hand discreetly reaching for the hidden handgun under her dress, waiting for the signal from Jack. Underground. Jack crawled through the damp service tunnel, the heavy air filled with the smell of grease and dead rats, the sound of dripping water from rusted pipes mingling with his pounding heart. He had infiltrated through the underground garage, taking down 2 guards with swift chokeholds. And now there was only the service elevator to the rooftop left. But when the door opened, surprise struck. Thomas Hale stood there, not in the VIP room, a Glock aimed directly at Jack's chest. Harlan, you're so stubborn, Hale said, his voice a deep mockery, his rosy face now distorted under the flickering fluorescent light. Kane is paying me double my CIA salary. Mills retirement funds, just a grain of sand. Jack lunged forward, but Hale fired. The bullet lodged in his thigh, pain burning like fire, blood gushing out, staining his jeans. He collapsed, but rolled to avoid a second shot, throwing the dagger that struck Hale's hand, causing the gun to clatter on the metal floor. Hale screamed. Lunging into a struggle in the cramped space, he grabbed Jack's neck, raining punches to his face. Blood spraying from Jack's nose. Jack countered with a knee to the gut, hearing the breath escape, then tightened his grip around Hale's neck, but the mole was stronger than expected, using his elbow to jab at Jack's thigh wound, making him scream in pain. They rolled on the wet floor, the sound of metal clashing echoing like a death knell. Hale pulled a knife from his boot, stabbing sideways at Jack's neck. The blade grazed his side, tearing through hot flesh, blood mingling with sweat streaming down. Jack grabbed his wrist, twisting it. The sound of breaking bone echoed dryly. The knife fell, and he finished with an uppercut to Hale's jaw, sending him crashing back unconscious, eyes rolling white. But the plan had collapsed. An explosion rang out from the rooftop. Not a bomb, but a smoke grenade from Kane's men. Sarah was captured. Kane's voice booming through the radio, "Thank you, Sarah. You led him here. Betrayal from an ally. Lucia had been bought off. Or worse." Killed. Jack staggered up the elevator. Blood from his thigh and side dripping into a long trail on the floor. Rushing into the chaos of the rooftop, thick white smoke covered the banquet hall. Guests screamed and ran in panic. Tables overturned. Champagne glasses shattered. Kane stood in the middle, gripping Sarah's neck. A desert eagle aimed at her head. "Harlan, you arrived just in time to see the bomb go off," he roared. The smirk flashing under the crystal chandelier, Jack charged forward. Beretta raised to shoot. The bullet hit Kane's shoulder, making him release Sarah. But one of Kane's men rushed from the shadows, smashing the butt of his gun into Jack's head. Pain exploded like a lightning strike. His vision blurred. Jack collapsed amidst the sparkling shards of glass. Sarah screamed, rushing to shield him. But Kane shot. The bullet pierced her shoulder again, blood spraying dark red on her black dress. Jack crawled up, using all his strength to charge at Kane. They wrestled by the rooftop railing, the Chicago wind whipping against their faces like a scythe. Kane punched at Jack's thigh wound, the pain making him scream. But he tightened his grip around Kane's neck, pushing him over the railing. Kane staggered, falling backward onto the wet, rain-soaked floor. Kane's men surged in. Gunfire erupted, bullets embedding into the marble walls. Dust flying everywhere. Jack pulled Sarah and ran down the stairs, blood from his wounds pooling into a puddle on the steps. The sound of footsteps chasing them like a war drum. They dashed into the underground tunnel beneath the hotel. Darkness swallowing them like a monster's mouth. The sound of dripping water and heavy breathing echoing. Sarah collapsed, losing too much blood. Lily. To save her. Jack held her, his voice breaking, "I will." But as he turned away, a bullet from the darkness struck his back, pain burning like hellfire. Jack fell face down, his vision fading. The Chicago tunnel becoming a living tomb. The final betrayal, from those he trusted, had pushed him into the abyss. But Jack Harlan was not dead. Not yet. The underground tunnel beneath Chicago swallowed Jack Harlan's heavy breathing, the damp darkness wrapping around him like a giant snake. Only the sound of dripping water from the rusted concrete ceiling and the pounding of his heart echoing. The bullet lodged in his back felt like a hellfire, warm blood spreading and soaking his leather jacket, blurring his vision into dark splotches. Sarah Reed lay a few meters away, blood from her shoulder wound mingling with the puddle of water, her face pale under the flickering fluorescent light. Jack. Lily. Save her, she whispered, her hand trembling, reaching out. But he could only nod, the pain swallowing every word. The sound of hurried footsteps approached, Marcus Kane's henchmen. At least 10 of them. AK rifles ready, flashlights sweeping like the scythe of death. The final betrayal had pushed him here, alone against the world. But Jack Harlan had never known surrender. He crawled up, gripping the Beretta tightly despite only having 3 bullets left, the cold dagger in his other hand, and charged into the darkness like a wounded ghost. The first scream rang out as Jack burst from the corner. Using the narrow tunnel's layout to his advantage, he took down the first man with a chokehold from behind, his left hand covering the guy's mouth, his right stabbing through the throat. Blood spraying hot, muffling the scream. The guy fell silently, the AK clattering on the stained concrete floor. The next 2 turned sharply, flashlights wildly illuminating Jack's pained face. They fired, bullets embedding into the concrete walls, dust swirling like smoke. Jack rolled to avoid. A bullet grazed his ear, then sprang up using the first guy's body as a shield, firing 2 shots from the Beretta that hit one in the chest. Blood splattered. The second guy lunged at him with a dagger, the steel blade glinting under the flashlight. slashing towards Jack's neck. He dodged just in time, the blade grazing his cheek, leaving a fresh trail of blood, then countered with a low kick to the knee. The sound of breaking bone echoed. The guy collapsed, and Jack finished with a stab to the heart. The motion swift and clean like in Krav Maga training at Quantico, but they were more numerous. Gunshots echoed through the tunnel like thunder. Bullets ricocheting off the stone walls, sending debris flying like a mine explosion. Jack ran for his life, blood dripping from his back, leaving a long trail on the wet floor. Memories of Lena flashing through the pain. Don't let them defeat you, Jack. For the innocent, he turned into a side tunnel, where rusted pipes hung like spider webs, and used his wits. He cut the pipe with his knife, water gushing out like a fire hose, soaking the slick concrete floor. 3 men chasing after slipped in. One fell. The gun skidding from his hand, Jack lunged, kicking hard into the guy's head, his skull cracking on the hard floor. The second man fired, but the water shorted out the flashlight, plunging them into darkness. Jack choked the guy from the shadows, elbow smashing into his temple, the sound of breaking bone echoing dryly. The last one panicked, firing wildly. A bullet lodged into Jack's shoulder, making him scream in pain. Blood spraying dark red, he charged forward, using the knife to slice across the guy's throat. The third body collapsing into a puddle of water mixed with blood. Now only 4 men remained, led by a burly guy with an eagle tattoo on his neck, Kane's loyal henchman. They blocked the end of the tunnel, rifles aimed straight, flashlights shining on Jack like a death stage. "You're dead," Harlan the guy yelled, his deep voice drowning out the dripping water. Jack panted, his back aching as if torn apart. But he smirked, tossing the empty Beretta onto the floor as a challenge. "Come closer," he growled, charging into hand-to-hand combat. The first guy swung the butt of his gun, but Jack dodged, using a military throw to slam the guy onto his back, his head cracking against the concrete wall with a loud thud. Blood streamed from the guy's skull, but the second was already close, stabbing straight into Jack's stomach. The blade pierced through his jacket, tearing into hot flesh. He gritted his teeth against the pain, grabbing the guy's wrist and twisting it. The sound of breaking bone rang out. The knife fell, and Jack kneed him in the groin, making him collapse and scream like a wild animal. The last 2 charged at once. One punched Jack's jaw, causing blood to spray from his mouth, while the other choked him from behind like a vice. The suffocation exploded, his vision fading to black dots. But Jack elbowed backward into the guy's stomach, hearing the breath escape, then spun around, sweeping his leg to knock both of them down. They wrestled on the slick floor, knives and fists flying everywhere. Jack punched one in the face repeatedly. The nose broke, blood splattering, then choked the other with his bare hands, muscles straining to the point of trembling. The guy struggled, nails clawing at Jack's arm, but he wouldn't let go, tightening until the sound of breaking bone echoed. The fourth body collapsed motionless. The last burly guy stood up, his face twisted in rage, pulling Kane's Desert Eagle from his waistband. "You're a monster," he growled. Pulling the trigger, the bullet grazed Jack's ear, burning the damp air. Jack lunged, using all his strength to push the gun off course. They wrestled in the cramped space. The guy punched at Jack's back wound, causing pain to spread like lightning. Jack screamed but countered with a knee to the gut, hearing the guy retch. They rolled on the floor, the gun clattering. The guy stabbed Jack's thigh with a dagger, the steel blade piercing flesh, blood gushing warm amidst the cold. Jack screamed, grabbing the guy's neck and smashing his head against the concrete wall, the impact echoing like a death bell. The 10th guy collapsed, eyes rolling white. The tunnel fell into a deadly silence. Only Jack's heavy breathing and Sarah's weak moans remained. He staggered towards her, blood from his back, shoulder, and thigh pooling into a puddle on the floor, his vision blurring from blood loss. But the darkness ahead stirred. Marcus Kane stepped out from the corner, his face twisted under the flickering light, holding a glinting handgun, his smirk revealing yellowed teeth. "Harlan, you've killed all my men," he said, his deep voice mixed with a distorted admiration. "But you're too late. The bomb has been activated tomorrow morning. Chicago will burn." Jack tightened his grip on the knife. Standing up despite his trembling legs, Mills's retirement funds, you used them to fund terrorism, to kill innocent people like Lena Kane, laughed loudly, the sound echoing through the tunnel like thunder. "Exactly. Retirement money, for the old folks, now buys bombs. Buys lives. I am the new king of this city." They charged at each other in a tragic hand-to-hand duel. No guns left. Only fists and knives. Kane swung a punch like a sledgehammer, hitting Jack's shoulder, causing the old wound to split open. Blood spraying dark red, Jack countered with a sweeping knife strike, cutting a deep line across Kane's arm. He screamed and lunged to choke Jack like a vice. They wrestled in the puddle of water mixed with blood. Kane punched at Jack's bullet wound, making him scream in pain, his vision flickering. "You will die because of her," Kane growled, his eyes bloodshot. Jack kneed him in the groin, hearing the pained groan, then grabbed his neck. Pushing him down, they rolled, Jack's knife stabbing through Kane's belly, the steel blade tearing flesh with a horrifying ripping sound. He clutched his stomach, blood gushing out, staggering back. You can't defeat me." But Jack lunged one last time, choking him and smashing his head against the wall. The sound of breaking bones rang out. Kane collapsed motionless, his eyes wide open, staring into the darkness. Jack fell beside Sarah, his hands trembling as he held her. "Sarah." "The bomb code." "I will stop it." She smiled weakly, blood spilling from her mouth. "Lily." "Thank you." Like Lena, his heart shattered, tears mingling with blood. "Don't." "Sarah." But she was gone, her breath extinguished in his arms. The Chicago tunnel fell silent, only the sound of dripping water like a lament. Jack took the USB from Kane's pocket, the bomb detonation code flashing on the screen. He had 6 hours to save the city and save Lily. But the price of justice was too high. Sarah had paid with her life. Jack stood up, dragging himself out of hell. The Chicago dawn waiting with the final challenges ahead. The Chicago dawn appeared faintly through the gaps of the underground tunnel, staining the blood-soaked concrete floor with dim, ghostly streaks like the whispers of death. Jack Harlan knelt beside Sarah Reed's body, his trembling hand gently stroking her damp brown hair soaked with sweat and blood, his heart breaking into sharp pieces. "Sarah." "No," he whispered, his voice hoarse, breaking for the first time after years of callousness, tears streaming down, mingling with the blood oozing from his back wound. She was gone, her last breath carrying a message about Lily, the 8-year-old girl with her mother's blue eyes, still threatened by Kane in Virginia. But Jack had no time to mourn. The USB in his hand flashed the bomb detonation code, the countdown clock showing only 5 hours and 30 minutes left. The bomb, a massive C4 hidden in a truck beneath the FBI headquarters, would wipe out the entire loop if it detonated. Jack clenched his fists, the pain from his back, shoulder, and thigh merging into a driving fire. He would stop it, save Lily, and hand over the $450,000 of Mills' retirement funds to his family. Justice was not victory, It was silent sacrifices. He dragged himself out of the tunnel, blood dripping into a long trail on the rusty iron steps. The early morning wind from Lake Michigan whipping against his face like a cold whip. The money suitcase, the one that had led him through Mexico, Russia, Japan, France, Nepal, and Spain, lay safely in the old truck he had stolen from the Palmer House garage. Jack sped through the still sleepy streets of Chicago, the morning sun shining on the skyscrapers sparkling like silver blades, the distant sound of car horns blending with the chirping of sparrows. The FBI headquarters in downtown loomed like a grey concrete fortress, the American flag fluttering in the lake breeze. Jack parked a block away, using an encrypted phone to hack into the security system, skills from his CIA days, now used to save the very agency that had betrayed him. The detonation code from the USB led him to the truck disguised as cargo, hidden beneath the underground garage. Inside the garage, the heavy air smelled of gasoline and metal, the generator humming like the whispers of a monster. Jack crawled under the truck, his hands trembling from blood loss, cutting the bomb wires with Kane's blood-stained dagger. The countdown clock flashed a bright red 3 minutes and 10 seconds, sweat mixed with blood, his vision blurring. But he remembered Lena's words, "You are strong for those who cannot save themselves." The blade cut through the last red wire. The ticking stopped. The bomb was disarmed. Jack fell back onto the cold garage floor, gasping for breath, the alarm blaring from afar as the system detected the breach. He dashed outside, disappearing into the bustling morning crowd on Michigan Avenue, leaving behind a saved city unaware. 2 hours later, Jack took an emergency flight to Virginia, his body exhausted, his wound seeping blood through his thin sweater. Dulles Airport greeted him with a gentle autumn sun, yellow leaves drifting down on the highway leading to the suburbs of Arlington, where Sarah's family lived, a small wooden house by the Potomac River, with a white fence and a garden of withered roses. Lily, an 8-year-old girl with messy brown hair and her mother's blue eyes, was being held captive by 2 of Kane's henchmen in the garage out back, her hands and feet bound with coarse rope. They, remnants of Kane's empire, sneered as they saw Jack burst in through the back door, one of them aiming a handgun at Lily's head. "Stop, Harlan. The girl dies if you move." But Jack didn't stop. He lunged forward like a whirlwind, throwing a dagger with all his might that struck the hand of the man holding the gun. The steel blade pierced his wrist. The gun clattered to the floor, and dark red blood sprayed across the greasy garage floor. The second man spun around, swinging a fist as large as a sledgehammer, hitting Jack's shoulder and tearing his old wound open, pain shooting through him like lightning. He gritted his teeth, blocked the second punch with his elbow, then countered with a knee to the man's stomach. A sharp gasp echoed, and the second man collapsed. Lily burst into tears. "Mister, where's my mommy?" Jack cut the girl's ropes, hugging her small, trembling body tightly. "Your mother saved me. Now I'll protect you." He called a loyal CIA special ops team, the ones he trusted after reporting Thomas Hale, to take Lily to a safe place. The little girl held his hand, whispering, "You're like the knight in my mommy's stories." Jack gave a faint smile, his heart aching. "I'm just a passerby, kid." Late in the afternoon, Jack drove back to Chicago, the suitcase of money on the seat beside him like a final burden. Mr. Mills's family, Mrs. Mary, a 70-year-old widow with pure white hair and eyes clouded by the loss of her husband, lived in a small apartment in the South Side, with yellowed wallpaper and the smell of cookies baking from an old gas stove. She opened the door, her wrinkled face full of suspicion. "Who are you, Henry?" "He's—" Jack knelt and opened the suitcase, where stacks of clean cash glittered under the table lamp. "This is Mr. Mills's pension. I got it back from the people who stole it. Mrs. Mary tremblingly touched the money, tears rolling down her face. Thank you. God bless you. Jack just nodded, stood up, and left without another word. He didn't need thanks. Justice was the only reward, no matter how costly. That night, Jack sat alone on a stone bench by Lake Michigan, the autumn wind whipping his face, carrying the scent of the vast water and decaying leaves. The city glittering with neon lights in the distance like a broken dream. Sarah was dead. Lena was dead. Kenji, Elena, Lucia, all had sacrificed themselves for him. For the clandestine justice he pursued. The price is too high, he whispered to the darkness, his hand touching Lena's wedding ring hidden in his pocket. But as he stood up, his phone vibrated, a message from an anonymous source. Kane was just a small lead. The ShadowNet organization, a new underground network, is rising from the ashes. They hunt people like you. Run. Or join. Jack frowned, his grey-blue eyes flashing with an unextinguished fire. A new organization. Bigger. Darker. With the sigil of a distorted eagle. Not Kane's, but that of a global power. He disappeared into the Chicago shadows. Not to flee, but to prepare for the next battle. Justice doesn't end. It just begins again. In the eternal solitude of a nameless hero. The night sky glittered with stars, like a promise of bloody dawns to come.